Perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah. So before we dive into kind of the, making how to make a walk accessible, which can be a lot of information to take in. So, before we start digesting all of that, I guess just wanted to chat about our purpose in being here and connecting with Nova Scotia Walks and Hike Nova Scotia, in that, we're located in Halifax and we try our best to serve, as many people as we can in the community, but recognizing Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada are especially full of very sometimes far apart rural communities that we might not be able to reach just due to our, our capacity as people. So being able to connect with organizations like NS Walks and all these different walking groups can be helpful for us in that, that's a way for us to provide more outreach and programming to people we have and work with in these further away or smaller communities. When we can share this knowledge and kind of training with you as walk leaders and volunteers, it helps us to be able to trust that, when we have someone who's further away, we know exactly where we might be able to recommend them to go for a walk or get involved in the community, because we know that there are these other individuals, other programs that are out there that are informed on, adjusting their programming or their services for them. So the hope is that more people want to learn about making their walks accessible. People want to learn more about disability and inclusivity, and making their programs and walking groups accessible for others, and kind of just connecting us all a bit more, having more opportunity for everyone to be more involved in the community, and it snowballs from there in terms of benefits for everyone. So I don't know, Sydney, if you wanted to discuss at all a bit about our volunteer opportunities or positions.
Yeah, so in partnership with NS Walks there, we're also looking to kind of expand our program with Next Steps, which is a walking partner kind of mission here. So eventually we want to, again, expand out throughout Nova Scotia and kind of offer that to everyone. So right now we're focusing in Halifax right now. We have our first lovely volunteer, Sally, to kind of help out with that. But it's a great program that we're wishing to expand just to maximize independence and personal empowerment for people with disabilities in the community. So we're looking for volunteers who might be with Walk Nova Scotia to help out with that and join in on a weekly walk, maybe throughout Nova Scotia, again, starting in Halifax first and kind of growing out from there. So if anyone is interested in that, you can always contact me. I'm sure Catherine can link the description and stuff like that. And you can always chat more to me about that and kind of what the program looks like week to week and the time commitment for it. But we're happy to have more people just to help push that and get people active in the community.
Mm-hmm. Especially post virtual world, which has its benefits, but we all know how great it is to be in person and moving together. So with that, if there's no questions to start off, I can start sharing my screen. And I will just say, especially where this is, I kind of prefer, smaller groups. If there's any questions or comments throughout, please just stop me and ask. I received some questions from Catherine beforehand that I've included at the end of the presentation that we'll go over. So if people who are not currently here have sent those in, then we'll go over that. And then, yeah, anything that comes up along the way, please feel free to ask or suggest or even add something that I might not know. So with that, I'll pull it up here. Everyone can see that okay? Yeah, perfect. And everyone can still hear me okay? Amazing. All right, we're off to a good start. So yeah, we're going to be chatting about creating disability inclusive walking groups, specifically geared towards physical disabilities. Of course, this walking is mainly a physical kind of thing we do, but this extends far beyond just physical disabilities and kind of just the tip of the iceberg to start off today. And I do just want to highlight that, like I said, this can feel really overwhelming for people who maybe haven't delved into this sort of field before, or these ideas of making programs accessible, and just being here and being willing to listen and learn is a huge first step. So being able to take even one thing away from this today is great, and continuing on with your own journey of learning and kind of exploring your own community and connections is the best thing you can do. So I've tried to keep it fairly brief and overview as to not feel too overwhelming or take too long. But yeah, just being aware that, this can sometimes feel really like a lot to take in, and just recognizing that, being here is one of the most important things. So thank you for that. And as Catherine mentioned, I'm Alyssa. I'm a program instructor and community programs coordinator at March of Dimes here in Halifax, and Sydney's our volunteer engagement coordinator. I'll have our contact at the end as well if you want to contact us for anything at all, or being involved with helping create more accessible walking groups. So first things first is just the prevalence of disability in Nova Scotia, which again, I kind of assume, with especially the prevalence that's listed there of 1 in 3, we've all kind of know someone or have been in contact with someone, or maybe have been someone or are someone with a disability. And that's only growing as our population ages. So, we're all affected by disability, whether it's right now or, later in life. And that includes a variety of conditions that someone may have to deal with. And they can be temporary, they can be permanent, maybe they're lifelong, maybe they're acquired. Like I said, it's likely we all know someone with some form of disability. We actually have a higher percentage of disabled citizens than any other province in Canada. And this just highlights our need for inclusive programming and community resources, living with and bound to acquire disabilities, just to live and age as healthfully as possible. Aging in place is becoming really important, feeling fulfilled, feeling autonomous, all those basic things we all want. This is a great first step to helping people achieve that. I did link I'll send you these slides after as well, Catherine, but just some stats there, the page with the prevalence of disability in Nova Scotia, and also a page that includes some information about accessibility for you to read up on in your own time. And then moving on to accessibility. So it was interesting when I was looking up the definition of accessibility, there's a number of things that come up, and even the definition of accessibility in terms of, directly related to disability, I found interesting. So I kind of put pieces of them all here, that being, the quality of being able to be reached or entered, the quality of being easy to use or obtain, the quality of being easily understood or appreciated. And I think all of these things just sort of lead to one sort of roundabout reason or definition of accessibility, just being, wanting to be valued and heard and seen as a person. And that goes for whether you have a disability or not, kind of in every aspect of our lives. It really extends beyond just ramps and grab bars, but into our everyday life. And it's kind of just a way of seeing and accepting others and designing a world where we can all feel welcomed. Leading me to why is it important? Accessibility is accessibility for all. I like to use the example of, I think we'd all rather walk up a ramp than climb a bunch of stairs. I can't think of a situation where more accessible kind of practices would be implemented and someone would be upset about that or disadvantaged by that. So moving off of my stair comment, same thing with automatic doors. You have an arm full of groceries. How easy is it to just tap a button with your elbow? It's not, these things aren't also reserved just for people with disabilities. And I think that's something we're moving away from as well, except for parking spots, of course. But, in terms of creating those more accessible environments, it's beneficial for all of us. And like I said, it's likely that some of us at some point in our life will need them too. So just starting to think in that mindset of, it's not so much thinking specifically of if someone's in a wheelchair or if they're using an assistive device. It's just, how do I want to feel welcomed in this space, whatever that looks like, and how might someone else want to feel that too. And if you're unaware of it, Nova Scotia actually has an Accessibility Act of making Nova Scotia accessible by 2030. This involves multiple facets or branches of accessibility, from physical spaces and all the way to kind of those more internal biases and attitudes that we hold. So trying to eliminate or push those away by 2030, which is a huge undertaking, and definitely something good to be aware of and read up on. I've got the link there as well, just kind of on the act and what that is supposed to look like. So that's also pertains to people if you're a business owner, or again, if you are a volunteer in the community. Just nice to be aware, because I find once we're given this, these tidbits of information or insight, it helps really change your perspective on your community and your day-to-day life, the things you're doing. You start to notice how things could be different. And the more people that we have noticing and speaking up about those things, the better and quicker we can move to that goal. So common ways to create accessible spaces and mindsets, vary from a personal, level. Just, starting small is gaining new perspective, which again, anyone here or watching this, that's what you're here to do. And that's huge in itself. Just thinking about, what if I was in a wheelchair right now? What if I didn't have perfect hearing? What if I, was visually impaired? What if I couldn't communicate, fully verbally? All those things, just kind of challenging yourself when you're walking through a space or attending something. If I were someone else, how would this look, or would I feel welcome? Challenging stigmas. So a lot of times, people might think that's not my problem. I don't have to think about it. Those people don't come here, whatever. Really challenging that stigma and speaking up when if you hear language like that, or you see kind of actions that represent that. And again, that just comes from having that new perspective and sharing that with others. And then starting small. Like I said, this can sometimes feel very overwhelming, especially, I'm assuming anyone who's a walk leader, you have a sort of connection and empathy for other people. And when you have those skills, these things can feel really heavy once you realize, I haven't been doing this, or I should have thought of this sooner, et cetera. So just starting small, what can you do tomorrow or the next time you go out that's going to help improve accessibility? And again, that can go back to just recognizing when a doorway is super narrow. There is also a recently updated website. I believe this came out just a few months ago, about Accessible Nova Scotia. So really, it's different than the one above here, really just championing what accessibility is in a very digestible manner, things you can do, organizations that exist, all that kind of stuff. So also something nice to check out there. So moving into common disability types and their effect on walking. So again, this is just speaking out on physical abilities and disabilities, and very generally speaking, of course, things very much change person to person and community to community even. But these are just kind of the main sort of diagnoses that we work with, so that I'm most comfortable talking on, and that I find, based on our programs at least, are looking to reintegrate into those community programs, but having a hard time due to the symptoms of their diagnosis. But again, this could be extending into many other things that I haven't mentioned here. So the first one being post-stroke, so someone who's had a stroke. This can include range of reducing their mobility, from maybe not having any mobility at all on their affected side, maybe they're improving it, maybe they have some, maybe they're wearing or using a certain device to help them improve that. They could have reduced sensation on their affected side. They could experience reduced balance, muscle stiffness or flaccidity, fatigue, and sometimes pain. Parkinson's disease, also, I think all of these actually include some sort of fatigue. That tends to be a very big barrier for a lot of people. But Parkinson's, you might see that tremor, some rigidity, reduced initiation of movements, and stooped posture. So they may start to kind of round forward, kind of turning inward might be a good way to describe, their physical symptoms. And then that could increase their ability to, or their inability, to lift their feet, take bigger steps, resulting in kind of shuffling and potentially, some fall risks associated there. So a lot of goal of people with Parkinson's disease is to find ways to improve and maintain that ability to, remind their body to take bigger steps and to, look ahead where they're going, and overcoming those symptoms that can sort of come on. And again, with that, of course, reduced balance and fatigue. Multiple sclerosis, there's multiple types of multiple sclerosis. So typically I'm talking about some relapsing remitting that people would experience, and that they're still kind of functioning in their day-to-day life, but they will and can get those effects kind of that come and go of reduced balance or dizziness, some pain, heat intolerance, which is a very interesting aspect of it, and also important to know about, some spasticity or weakness, and some reduced coordination potentially as well. And then mobility conditions, I put kind of generally, multiple causes, that could be from having a knee surgery or having just pain in your knees or hips or back, anything like that, all the way up to other disabilities that might not be primarily physical, but may affect your physical ability. So changes in mobility, needing for those adaptations, increased fatigue, changes in strength, heart rate, blood pressure, etc. So overall, just, things to be aware of when you're thinking of planning a walk, specifically for someone who might be challenged with some of these things. And I think one important thing I wanted to highlight is, again, I'll be sending these slides. You can look back at this and look into them specifically. If you're having, you have one of these conditions coming to your group, it's really important to look into that more. But I think just generally understanding the symptoms someone might be having and being aware of that when you're planning your walk, which we'll talk about. So making walks accessible. These are just sort of some ideas I've come up with, when I was thinking through creating a walk route. And again, there could be multiple other things as well, depending on your community and your group itself. Parking is a very important one. I think we all kind of, we all think about that often anyway, I feel, but just making sure there's ample parking spots in a clear lot that has, a designated lot. So thinking about not parking on the side of the road, not having super small kind of unmanaged parking spots. I'm thinking at some trailheads where there might be, huge potholes or divots in the pavement, or there's only a few, a little bit of space to park a bunch of cars. So you want to consider having that room to park their car, but also to then potentially assemble or put away their mobility devices beside their car, getting out of their car. You want to have that space around someone's parking spot for them to move freely and safely to, get to the walk. And again, having that parking lot or parking spot close enough to the beginning of the walk that there's not any dangerous navigation, crossing streets, or jaywalking streets or anything like that. And what I can say too is, I know this can be a bit more difficult in Nova Scotia, just given some of our trails and walking areas. It might just be making a notice if you know that someone's coming to your group that needs that parking over someone else who's able to park further away and cross the street. Just designating that to the folks that need it, and maybe making that aware to the rest of your group as well. The terrain, so making sure the terrain is smooth or fine gravel, that there's minimal or just gradual inclines, so not super steep inclines, and also avoiding steep declines, making sure it's free of roots, rocks, and barriers. And we can only do so much with this, especially with our weather in Nova Scotia, and things just kind of end up maybe where they weren't before in a pathway or something. So to the best of your ability, and when you are aware that something's coming up or maybe something's changed, just discussing that or making people aware as best or as soon as you can. Having options for rest, so very important. So public areas with benches or tables. There's also accessible picnic tables. I don't know if there's a ton of them. I know there's some in Halifax. Making sure there's washrooms. Sorry, my video's covering it there. Making sure there's washrooms, and even aiming for at least one on or near the route. If there's not one near your route, just being transparent about that and allowing people to plan for it. So again, this isn't all your responsibility to take on, it's things to be aware of. So, if your one walking route doesn't have a washroom, it doesn't mean don't have a walk. It just means, sometimes accessibility is just being open about what's not available and then maybe advocating for that. Pacing. So I know this came up earlier. We were talking about, how to kind of divide groups. So you can consider setting a standard or base pace or a pace range for your group that people can see before they join the group to decide, that works for me, or I'm looking to cruise and maybe that's not the group that I want to be in. Another thing that you can do, which actually I realized from a running group that I was involved in, is offering different distances or paces. So maybe you have someone else in your group or another leader in your area who wants to help you lead the group, and you can offer that, we're going to be standard 12-minute kilometer pace with the option for a 15-minute or whatever you need kilometer pace. You have someone who is willing to kind of just adjust as the walk goes to stay or buddy up with someone who wants to go a bit slower. And that kind of moves right into the next one, is the distance and time of the walk. So same thing is just offering, those variations for people to choose between. And what I find a lot of times is even just offering that is enough to make people feel comfortable to try things. So a lot of times people just don't want to go out and try something because, they don't know how fast people are going to be walking. They don't know if it's a group full of, Olympic power walkers, or if it's people who are just happy to connect with others. So I think just being open about, almost an elevator pitch, if you want, of what your group is really important. And that's usually enough to have people just come out and try it. I find, at least with the running group I was in, they always give the shorter option. And I find rarely anyone ever takes it. Even the slowest runners in the group, we're all going the same distance because there's that precedent set of someone is here with you, to run with you, to go with you, no matter what you need or want today, whether that's the shorter distance or to go, extra slow for the distance with the group. So again, just being open about that is accessible in itself. Unexpected circumstances. So this isn't necessarily specific to disability. Of course, we can all have unexpected circumstances. Definitely important to carry a cell phone and maybe even emergency contacts for your walkers if that's a concern for you. Again, most people probably have their own phone. Maybe they're walking close to home anyway. So that's going to vary based on your group and where you are. And walking in a populated or public area, again, if your concern may be, emergencies arising or just wanting to make sure you're close to services if you need them. You could also carry a backpack or a bag with additional supplies such as water or a sweater if you wanted. Again, this is all very much based on your group and the people and your own safety and comfort levels. And also to just be aware if any participants have any medical alert bracelets or specific protocols or medications. And again, to reiterate, it's not your responsibility to take on people's needs for the duration of your walk. People with disabilities, just like the rest of us, they know themselves, they know their day-to-day life, they know their challenges and what they need to do. So it's about that two-way communication as well. They're going to let you know if and what they need, and even if they want you to have something extra on hand, it's totally okay to ask those questions and clarify. It's not all of your weight to bury to make sure you're prepared for everything at any time. And then just some communication pieces as well. So this could be most common post-stroke or even, some cognitive decline that's age-related. So just being aware of this for one, when you're meeting with participants. And again, a lot of times people will have someone with them or they'll have devices, they know that they have communication challenges, so they've worked to adapt and live with those. But some things I've thought of is you can have pace or color cards, yes or no cards. A lot of times people with aphasia, if they have expressive aphasia, it can be particularly difficult to communicate while walking, that multitasking. So, considering not talking to them too much while they walk, but also just having those quick choices, are we going fast enough? Yes or no? Tap the yes. Do you want to slow down? Tap the yellow little circle or card you have, or even changing the pace of the group without talking. You can be at the front, hold up a red dot, meaning like, we're going to stop and look at this tree. We're green, we're going. Again, something that can be helpful for everybody, right? Looking at the specific considerations of the diagnoses we went over before. Again, a lot of these are it ends up being very similar what you're doing for each of them, but kind of thought I would highlight maybe some specific things they each might have or you might notice. So with the post-stroke, I think I mentioned earlier, they may have difficulty with that balanced gait due to the affected side if their foot is affected. They may be wearing an AFO or a dictus. So an AFO is like a sort of plastic brace that helps keep the ankle flexed or the foot in an ideal position for them. A dictus is a contraption that goes around your ankle. It has a bit of a bungee cord that attaches to your laces to help keep the foot flexed. So there's not as much kind of foot drop and maybe dragging the feet. They may have a walker or a cane. And the affected side can fatigue potentially, again, it's different per person, causing imbalance to the unaffected side. So, they may start to lean heavily to one side, rely more on one side, and that of course can present some risks in just falling and losing balance. So with that, we just want to be aware of their affected side, offering gentle guidance if needed and consented to by them. So again, they'll let you know. Noticing if their gait's changing and, maybe just saying like, how do people feel about slowing down? Do we want to take a rest? And again, options for those pacing, distance, and rest. With Parkinson's, it could cause those quick shuffled steps like I discussed. So that may result in difficulty lifting the feet or a stooped posture, increasing the risk for falls. They may already have something that they're using to help with that, rhythmical lifting and stepping of the feet. Some people have a visual guide on their walker. There's some really cool walkers that exist that actually have a laser kind of light where people can aim to step to. Or some of them use like a metronome or a beat to walk to as well. So the main thing with this, and again, Parkinson's is a huge range. You may not even see this, but if they do, just noticing if the steps are becoming shuffled, maybe being close by, offering to pause and take a break and restart the steps, and even offering a rhythm to help with stepping if that's something they're used to, they're accustomed to doing. Typically just a nice, strong, 1, 2, 1, 2, giving them something to step to just to overcome that barrier that their brain is creating and kind of get them to restart their steps again. It's also very cool to watch how quickly that can help change the gait. With MS, like I mentioned, mainly that pain, fatigue, reduced stamina, and again, to mention, people are so aware of their bodies and what they need and their own, abilities. If someone's truly feeling fatigued one day, they probably, will decide to not come to the walk. It's not your responsibility to decide if they're too fatigued or if they're doing okay. They're fully aware of that. The biggest thing here, I think, would just be to note the temperature for beginning your walk. If it's really warm or humid, maybe just if you have a group or, an email chain or whatever, just mentioning that maybe the day before so people can be aware of it and kind of make an informed decision. And just being open to noticing those signs of fatigue. Again, the options for the pacing, distance, and rest for everyone. And those general mobility conditions. So this is really going to depend on the person and their needs and what they share with you. So just being aware of their needs, asking them about them, and just what they might need, what might affect their walking. Maybe it's something different that we haven't even thought of. So everyone's an expert in themselves and making sure to give them that voice to tell you what they need. The do's and don'ts when considering disability. This is generic, but also in terms of the walking. So like I just mentioned, there's nothing wrong with asking if there are specific requirements or adaptations for someone. And this is, with or without a disability. Do you need frequent breaks? Do you like support when on your affected side if you're feeling fatigued? Do you want reminders? It's totally fine to have an open conversation with people as long as you're doing so in a respectful manner. I think everyone who again would be involved in this group is kind of already a very empathetic and understanding person. So I don't doubt that you would be able to, have that conversation in a kind way, but just not making assumptions and really just letting them tell you about themselves the same way you would when you're meeting a friend or, again, with the running group, as an example for me, asking each other before you go, how are we feeling today? Do we want to do 1 minute on, 1 minute off? Do we want to go fast? The same way you would have a conversation with anyone. Asking if there's anything you can be aware of. So again, with their device specifically, devices have become very varied and complex in some ways. So knowing, if they want you to know, these are where my emergency brakes are, this button does this, don't touch it. And finding out that if they request help, how they prefer it, if they're okay with you touching their device or helping them, those sorts of things. Getting to know their comfort level with the pace is hugely important, like you would with anyone, I think. So, do we want breaks? Do we want one-on-one support? Do you feel like you need X, Y, Z? And, maybe this is just something you can do when someone joins your group and have a quick, ask them to come 10 minutes early or chat with them on the phone beforehand to get an idea of this. Using and promoting language that's neutral, inclusive, and respectful. So I think that's kind of straightforward, but just being very aware of how you're talking, and just, being mindful of different experiences people may have had, especially if their disability was acquired. And remember that disability can affect any one of us at any time, and accessibility in all facets benefits everyone. Some of the don'ts: don't disclose someone's needs or disabilities to others without them or their permission. So, before they arrive, telling the group that what they have or what they need, and, in that sort of manner, unless of course they ask you to. Don't assume what someone needs or wants based on their diagnosis or initial meetings. So again, that's why I haven't dove into too many specifics here, because everyone is different. Don't touch someone's mobility device or assistive device without asking first. And if it's kind of a quick situation, you can always announce beforehand, but just not kind of going right for that without kind of making them aware first. And definitely don't use language that highlights or dismisses the difficulties or differences, such as bound to a wheelchair, something we hear often, but we're trying to move away from. A lot of people don't see that they're bound to a wheelchair. That's the way that they can live and fulfill their life and daily activities. It's a freedom to some people, certainly not a bind. And yes, someone with a wheelchair could totally join your walking group, even if they're rolling along. Trying not to use the word suffering from a condition. Again, a lot of people don't consider themselves victims or sufferers of their disability. Again, it's given them perspective. It's, in a way they've overcome it. They've, lived their life still, despite any challenges they've come across. So typically just saying they have a condition, if you are talking about it, or particularly in the language of stroke, just saying stroke survivor. The words special needs and handicap are kind of on their way out. These are more recent developments, but special needs leads kind of towards, we have to really adapt or create this special space for people, when again, going back to accessibility is for everyone and everyone has needs. So by kind of cornering them off into special needs, we're more so segregating that group versus integrating them with our society, even just with that language. So just take out the word special and they're just needs, like all of us have. Handicap, it's just a little bit dated. So again, the word disability is not a bad word. You'll generally find out as you get to know people what their preferences are around talking about their disability, but just refraining from that as well. Typically in the method that's usually used, so like handicap parking or handicap space, just staying accessible is fine. And of course, avoiding joking language surrounding your own fatigue or anything you're going through and relating it to, having a stroke or having a heart attack, anything like that. And especially avoiding, which we don't always think of first off, is emphasizing your sympathy or feeling sorry for someone. They may not feel sorry about their condition, or they may not, it's may not be sad for them. So just kind of, again, being neutral, and it's okay to ask, how do you feel about that? How are you doing? But not right off the bat, just feeling bad for someone because they have a disability. That was a lot, I know. So I'm wrapping it up there a little bit. And again, just reminding you after all that information dump to start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. It's not a matter of remembering everything we just said, implementing it all at once, or trying to change the world or feel like you should know it all. It's just picking one thing, starting where you are, talking to people, being open-minded and doing what you can to start. And we all, you move forward from that and build on that. And eventually it does become more second nature, but yeah, not being too hard on yourself right now as you're beginning. So these were the questions, some of the questions that came through previously that I addressed a little bit in the presentation, but we can go over more now as well. So the first one being around physical barriers and accessible washrooms. So like I said, always important to just scope out your route prior to creating your walk or going on your walk as much as you can, and reducing those barriers as much as possible. Remember, it's not your load to bear entirely to make everything accessible, but just being aware and being open about what exists. Same thing with accessible washrooms. There apparently will be a standard for this coming up by 2030, but currently there's not. So if there is a washroom near your walk, just going in, checking it out, again, put yourself in someone's shoes and just know kind of the layout and being able to share that with someone if that's something they're going to need, so they can, again, plan accordingly for themselves. Integrating and adjusting for speed, we kind of went over that as well. Just if you're able to, offering those different paces, finding out even if the group is open to, you know, this week we're going at a slower pace, next week we'll pick it up. We're having one person who's happy to kind of adjust as needed, and so no one's feeling, you know, left behind or left out. Case of emergencies or injuries. Again, this is nothing specific to disability. I think it's something we should be prepared for no matter what, but I can understand kind of the increased uncertainty or worry when it comes to someone with a disability. Basically, the overall approach would be to just approach it as you would with anyone else. You know, if someone has fallen, for example, you know, making sure that they're out of harm's way, that they're not going to be, you know, someone's not going to trip over them or vice versa. They're not going to, you know, have any other issues around them. And then as long as they're conscious, you know, asking them what they need. Do you need some time to get up? Do you want help getting up? You know, maybe you just want to stay there for a little bit to take in the situation. Just kind of approaching that in a calm manner and ensuring that there's not a lot of attention or crowding unnecessarily either. And then of course, you know, if someone is not conscious, then you essentially go right to what you would learn in first aid for anyone. You know, what is their emergency protocol? Do they have that medical alert bracelet? Who can you call? You know, all of those things. So really it's not any different other than, you know, maybe just knowing if they go down, how would they like to be helped at best? What's safest for them? You know, especially if they have an affected side, making sure we're not going and pulling on that or helping them up with that side by accident, just being aware of those things. And then specific items to have on hand, just like mentioned before, this can be whatever you're comfortable with, whatever your group's comfortable with. You know, having people's contact, I think, is really smart. And then knowing, you know, does anyone have allergies? Is anyone carrying an EpiPen? Do they have that medical alert bracelet? Beyond that would be having anything that makes you comfortable. Do you want to carry extra water, sweater? Do you want to carry a collapsible cane or Nordic walking poles to hand off to someone if they need? That's all going to be up to you. So I wanted to give everyone just a few minutes now. There's no need to kind of share or speak up if you don't want to, but just based on all of that quick information, thinking about your current or upcoming walking group, you know, if you're planning one, how might you make your current route more accessible, or is it already accessible and you can feel pretty proud about that? How can you make your own planning or group more accessible? Can you improve your own understanding and awareness of disability and accessibility in your community specifically? And where might you find more resources for questions you have after this, or things you find yourself thinking about? Or what are you now more curious to learn about? Just taking a few minutes to kind of think about that. And I also have a page again for later use on just a couple resources to continue your learning. Again, that Accessible Nova Scotia page, a YouTube page on Accessible Adventurers. It's an interabled couple in Nova Scotia who travel all around and kind of talk about the pros and cons of what they encounter with accessibility. And then this other duo, All Access Life, kind of focusing on the same thing. That is our contact information. And I will stop sharing now so I can see everyone again. And again, I know that was a lot. I appreciate you for listening and, you know, being open to learning. And I'm hoping that, you know, there is some thoughts kind of pooling in your head now about how you can make your walk, your group, your community more accessible. And if there's any questions or anything right now or comments, then we can certainly dive into that.
That was absolutely excellent, Lisa. I learned a lot there, and it's such good information. And I didn't find it was overload. It was just the right amount of information. So I know it's
Perfect.
not easy with the large area to cover, but in a really good digestible way. So I really appreciate that. I've got a couple questions, but I'd rather, if anyone else has some, I'd like to give them an opportunity as well. So. Everybody's quiet. I can start just to get the ball rolling, I guess. Yeah, this made me think, certainly in terms of our training, kind of what other specific discussions we can have briefly. Although, as you know, we do try to say, plan your route as accessible as possible. There are so many elements to that, so it's really good to get into some of the specifics. Just as you were talking there about the Accessibility Act and so forth, I'm wondering at a municipal level, because again, keeping in mind we're a provincial program, we do try to work with municipalities as much as possible, connecting our leaders to municipal staff. When it comes to routes and places to walk around the province, is there any easy resources that municipalities currently would be using already, so they're more aware of it, so that they could kind of help work with the walk leader? Yeah, just kind of thinking along those lines.
Yeah, that's a great question. And also would be a great centralized idea to have. As far as I know, and I don't know, Sydney, if you know anything as well, there is an app and website called All Trails. And again, it's trails. So it doesn't quite help for when you're planning a route, just in a town. But they do tend to have information with each trail. And again, I think it's mostly user generated. So that depends on, if someone's been there who knows about accessibility and if they've deemed it accessible or rated it accessible. But they do tend to have information about, this is flat, this is accessible. And again, that's a very generic term right now. So we have to kind of still dig into what that means. If you are going to be going there, it's best to just go and see for yourself first. But it is a good kind of starting point to see, what is accessible and what's available. There's also an app called, I think it's Wheel something. I'll have to see if I have it. And that's actually about places that are accessible, so businesses and buildings, but also shows washrooms and if the washrooms are accessible. And it kind of shows the level to which it's accessible. So again, it's user generated. So people have made comments, could get in the door fine, couldn't get to the bathroom, could use the bathroom, had trouble getting into the actual establishment, and kind of showing where those are in relation to your walk as well. So you could know, like, this subway has an accessible bathroom and an accessible door. So we can plan our route to pass by that at some point. I'm going to have to find what the app is actually called. I think I have it here.
I know there's a where to go, but I don't know if that covers it or not. Where to go? The washer?
There is this one's called Wheel Map. This one's called Wheel Map. But there's also, yes, there is where to go. And that's, I think, more catered towards people who have like IBS or Crohn's and other sort of like bowel issues. But yeah, also very helpful, of course, because washrooms are washrooms for all of us. So, but yeah, this other one was Wheel Map, and that includes washrooms, but also includes, what locations or businesses are accessible. So especially if you're like meeting inside somewhere to start your walk, that could be helpful. And then, yeah, the All Trails app is the first one that comes to mind in terms of where it deems which trails and which kind of routes are accessible. And it does include, like rails to trails along with hiking trails. So I think that is a good option to start with. Otherwise, I'm not sure of other sites or resources that exist. Yeah. It's a great idea though. Should.
Yeah, because, when it comes to accessibility issues, people don't know what they don't know oftentimes.
Yeah.
And unless you have, first person experience, or like Anna, her, husband, for example, you're just not aware. So it's kind of how to be aware of those, what you need to be aware of when you're planning the routes and so forth. But, and I know since our program has started, I'm very aware that although we've had leaders take the training from the most rural to the most urban, when it comes time to getting groups together and plan the routes, they tend to be more in larger communities. And I can't help but think that part of the challenge is people in rural areas having those, where's the washroom? I don't know. There's no benches, there's no light. So it's still those same issues coming up. And that's why, when it comes to maybe working with municipalities, increasing that awareness of like, if you just had one bench and even some kind of a toilet, something. So it's just an ongoing process of educating, a little bit of advocacy, gentle advocacy, and also,
Absolutely. Yeah, and I love that idea and what you said about you don't know what you don't know, because that can tailor your approach to your walk as well. If you haven't started a group yet and you know for sure that you want to be the one who's offering, the most accessible route and group, then maybe you are, designing that route first and then having people, trying to find the people who want to do it. But maybe you're, waiting until people are interested in your group, figuring out what their needs are, and then designing your route based on that. And, it might take a bit more time, but then they know like this is going to be something that works for me. Instead of, like you said, starting with this big blank slate of your municipality and figuring out, where do I go? What's going to be, you could choose the most accessible route, but maybe it's not close to the people who need it. Like, and then moving from there. So again, even just starting with the thought and advocacy is super helpful.
Yeah, that's a great point, is being able to sort of maybe making tweaks as we need to in terms of the route, if we knew some people needed that for sure.
Yeah.
Good stuff. My wheels are turning.
I'm so glad. Yeah. No, it's like I said, it's a lot to take in, and just, remembering that you do not have to do it all at once. And it's also not entirely your load to carry. I've taken some of my load now and put it on you, to just make those small changes or little steps and do what you can. It's not a matter of making your whole route accessible tomorrow. It's, you recognize there's one person in your group who maybe could benefit from a slower pace, and maybe they don't even have a disability. It's just, now you're able to adjust for that or take an approach in a different way.
Exactly. And I know one of the things you mentioned was having different, maybe a slower and faster pace. And I think that's one of the things that Anna has done with her groups, recognizing, if you just want to talk to that, Anna, you've already.
While listening to the presentation, I find it's really great. And what we did at NS Walks Day, I catered to 3 different groupings. We did our regular Wednesday morning group, and then I offered one midday for the slower pace, and then we did an evening beach walk where it was open to anybody, bringing family, that sort of thing, and it was successful. What I find my challenge here is I know I have the husband who isn't always able to walk. Like if I wanted to say, let's do it every Wednesday afternoon, or, toward the evening, I can't rely on him. And the other person who has some disabilities is same thing with mobility. It's a different level with her, but I know her and she's a friend. So I can't always say that they're going to be there. So my feeling is, how do I reach like the senior center? Right, going in, it's still, this is Parsboro. Everybody is still paranoid about COVID, and then I don't want to say paranoid, but just very cautious. And then we have a long-term care center, and I was wondering if, I don't know. I have not been in there because, of course, it's closed to somebody from the outside like me. Would you have something like some literature like NS Walks has, like the rack cards and that kind of thing, where it distinguishes that we are catering to people with mobility issues? My dad had Parkinson's for 26 years, so I'm well familiar with it. And my mother-in-law had Alzheimer's and had issues with mobility as well. So I'm really familiar with it. I've worked with children with disabilities in my younger days. It's my background. So for me, it's tapping into those communities to provide that opportunity. And I find that that's the hardest. And it's a small town. Last census 1,400. I feel I'm really successful with my group on Wednesday mornings, and now the push is coming. Why can't we do higher intensity? And I'm going, hey, people, this is not a hike group. This is a walk group. So I'm educating on both levels in a way. I would really like to bring the people out that need the walking, that need that accountability and the socialization. That's what I want to focus on.
Totally. Yeah, I love that. And it is, I mean, I think Sydney and I both understand working in not-for-profit and all the outreach we have to do. It's hard to get into people sometimes. And I think it all boils down to, you know, what you can do, but also it almost relates to that saying of, you know, you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. So
Right.
people, it's the same thing with these centers, not that they don't want to be helped or they don't want the program, but you know, if they're still, you know, COVID averse, or they've got other protocols they're working through and all that stuff, you know, maybe it's just quietly giving them your information, your flyer, sending them an email about what's available, and or even doing like a you know, try it out kind of day where, you know, you cater to what they want or what they need. Maybe on Thursday mornings, they're out in the community and you can go meet them. So figuring that out and kind of meeting them where they're at or when they're ready, I think works best, which again, sometimes takes a lot longer than we want, but just having them know you're there. Maybe it feels a bit pushy on your end, but every couple months you're like, it's a beautiful day. We have our walking group. We're accessible.
Right.
In terms of certain, you know, tangible or sendable things that say you're accessible, we don't have anything particularly. I don't know, Sydney, if you've seen anything. I think, I mean, in my opinion, you could probably just make something yourself, or I don't know if NS Walks would come up with something saying like, here's how you know this group is accessible with this symbol or with this thing. And that symbol means this. It means this person has acknowledged or accounted for these things. I think that would be a good idea to have. But again, right now, if nothing like that exists, it could just be you know, making up your own email or kind of poster or whatever, and saying, you know, this exists. This is where we are. We've considered these things and feel confident in our abilities, you know, serving this population, and we're ready when they are, kind of thing.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking as you were speaking, getting in touch with the recreation department, the municipal recreation department. I really know the person who's in charge really well. So maybe approaching her first, then she's aware and she can help me spread the word. I think that might just be the way to go. Thank you very much. It's really great to bounce these ideas off. So thanks.
Yeah, I love it too. Yeah, absolutely. Anyone, you know, whether they're sharing things, you know, widely, or they have a bulletin board, or they have anything, you know, that's also an approach we take every day is, who do I know that might know one person or have one tiny, you know, open doorway into this world that I want to get into, and can they, you know, slide our poster under it for us, kind of thing. Yeah, so anyone you think of to reach out to, I think is a good idea.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and Anna, we can talk more about that too. There's been a couple of leaders reached out to, one was to Northwood here in the city, and as well one of the homes in Dartmouth as well. Colin has been able to make a connect there, and they're definitely interested. Like they have you know, sometimes their own rec therapist, but as well that extends their reach if they know that some of their clients can plug into our walks if possible. Yeah, so
I think there's a lot of opportunity there with senior homes coming from that background myself.
Oh yeah, right on. So to be continued on that one. Well, this is fantastic. Now I know we are technically out of time, but I know you wanted to have an opportunity, either one of you, Sydney or Lisa, to talk about this next steps a little bit, or
next step. So if again, just with this recording and stuff like that, if folks are interested, please reach out to me. We really want to start different groups throughout Nova Scotia as well, whether that be in partnership with NS Walks and kind of building upon that. That'd be great. We'll get you all through the training that March of Dimes provides. And this has been a great session just to kind of build that foundation as well. So there's lots of opportunity. We're just kind of starting the program up again after COVID hit. So I'll be working with Sally just to build that at our office on Bears Road there, and we'll reach out from there. So I'll put this as the plug to please reach out to me, and we can go over the volunteer position, which is Next Steps Walking Partner. It's very exciting. good group of folks will probably be interested in, as you, as you know, Catherine. So we'll build upon there.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that's another just sort of brain fart or idea I had is, you know, maybe with that partnership of being, you know, maybe that is the symbol of We Are Accessible is Nova Scotia. We're a Nova Scotia Walks group with a Next Steps partner. So that means, you know, we have a volunteer specifically who's been trained in accessibility and in Next Steps. This group is fully Next Steps, meaning this group is fully accessible.
I like that.
Yeah, so something like that. If that's something that leaders are interested in, you know, they know that, you know, you have the connections and the group and the interest, and you just want to make it happen. Maybe that's a way we can kind of build that together.
Sounds awesome. Yeah, sounds perfect. Yeah, I think there's so much potential there. Yeah,
that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you. I really enjoyed that webinar, and I feel like it was, you touched on so many different things, but they're all just things that, like, open communication, everybody can benefit from. So I just really appreciated how you set it up to be very accessible for everybody who may have different backgrounds and may know a little bit less or may know a bit more. So thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I appreciate it. And a little, I guess my final thing is I apologize now for anyone who gets frustrated in their community going forward when you see things that aren't accessible. like some of us do. I now go into places and I'm like, why would you have that there? Why wouldn't you make it like this? You just built this place. Yeah. So apologies for any future frustrations, but use it for good.
Oh, thanks.
I also want to say thank you very much. I felt it was really great to hear the steps that are being made, the strides toward accessibility. I find that 2030 is an awful long time away, but we can only do what we can do. So I used to live in Calgary, and that was a real big push 25 years ago, you know, so there was a lot of places to be accessible, but I understand. And it was definitely an eye-opener to hear that it's 1 in 3 and most likely 50% of people with challenges. So that was a huge eye-opener. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I also just want to say thank you. I really learned a lot from this, and I'm really excited to, like, get involved with the organization and stuff.
Me too. Yeah, it'll be great. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Well, cool. Well, yeah, well, thank you all again. And yeah, to be continued for sure, but I think we got some good steps to take next, and learned a lot for sure. Yeah.
Wonderful. Great. And I'll send along those slides to you, Catherine. And yeah, if there's any other